At exactly 3:00 in the morning, a single glowing screen allegedly exposed a royal reality so brutal, so final, and so impossible to spin that Prince Harry was forced into a desperate race against time. Because when Peter Phillips's wedding guest list was finalized, one shocking detail reportedly stood out above all others. Harry and Meghan were nowhere on it, not delayed, not forgotten, not pending, simply absent. And according to whispers surrounding the situation, that absence may have revealed more about Harry standing inside the royal family than any headline, interview, or memoir ever could. The story begins in the quiet darkness of Montecito, California, where the silence of the night was allegedly interrupted by a revelation that landed like a thunderbolt. As reports circulated regarding the finalized guest arrangements for Peter Phillips' upcoming wedding, attention immediately shifted toward one uncomfortable question. Where were Harry and Meghan? Why were the Duke and Duchess of Sussex missing from an event involving one of the very few royal relatives Harry was once believed to trust completely? According to the narrative now spreading through royal circles, the realization reportedly hit hard. Not because of a wedding invitation itself, but because of what the missing invitation symbolized. For years, Harry's public battles have centered around family, loyalty, trust, and belonging. But what happens when the family continues moving forward without looking back? What happens when the institution adapts to your absence so effectively that your presence no longer appears necessary? Those are the questions that suddenly began hanging over this story. And then something even more interesting happened. Almost immediately, another explanation began appearing across media reports. Harry and Meghan had supposedly lost touch with Peter Phillips. A simple explanation, a harmless explanation, a clean explanation. But was it really that simple? Or was this phrase serving another purpose entirely? Because critics quickly noticed something unusual. The wording shifted attention away from exclusion and redirected it toward distance. Instead of asking whether Harry had been left out, the discussion became whether relationships had naturally faded. Suddenly, the narrative was no longer about rejection. It was about drifting apart. But inside palace circles, according to ongoing speculation, some observers allegedly saw something very different unfolding. They saw damage control. They saw an attempt to soften a far more uncomfortable reality. And if that interpretation is correct, then the wedding itself becomes only part of the story. The real story becomes what the wedding symbolizes about the current state of royal relationships behind closed doors. Meanwhile, across Britain, preparations for Peter Phillips' wedding reportedly continued with remarkable calm. No public drama, no emotional statements, no interviews, just silence. And inside royal institutions, silence often carries more weight than words. Peter Phillips has long occupied a unique position within the royal family, never seeking the spotlight, rarely involved in controversy, and often viewed as one of the most steady personalities in the extended royal circle. That reputation is precisely why this situation has attracted so much attention. Because if even Peter Phillips now appears distant from Harry, what does that say about the wider family dynamic? The symbolism is difficult to ignore. This is the same cousin who was once seen as a stabilizing presence during some of the family's most emotionally difficult moments. The same figure often associated with maintaining bridges when tensions existed elsewhere. Yet today, observers are questioning whether that bridge still exists at all. And perhaps the most unsettling detail is that nobody appears interested in publicly arguing about it. No angry rebuttals, no dramatic palace responses, no royal counterattack, just silence. A silence that seems to be speaking louder with every passing day. As the summer wedding approaches, insiders continue discussing what many describe as a broader shift taking place inside the monarchy. A shift where emotional considerations are being replaced by institutional priorities. A shift where protecting stability appears more important than repairing damaged relationships. And a shift where personal history may no longer outweigh present-day realities. For Harry, that possibility creates a painful question. If private family gatherings are becoming inaccessible, where exactly does he fit within the royal structure he once called home? Because this story is no longer just about one invitation. It is about belonging. It is about trust. It is about whether certain fractures have now become permanent. And most importantly, it is about what Peter Phillips' decision may be signaling to the rest of the world. Because while headlines focus on a wedding guest list, something much bigger appears to be unfolding beneath the surface. The royal family seems to be sending a message without speaking a single word. And as that message spreads across Britain and beyond, one chilling possibility is becoming harder to ignore. What makes this story even more explosive is that the deeper observers look into the situation, the less it appears to be about a wedding and the more it appears to be about about a complete restructuring of relationships inside the royal family. Because weddings in royal circles are never just celebrations. They are symbols. They are public displays of who belongs, who is trusted, who remains inside the circle, and who has quietly drifted beyond its borders. That is why the attention surrounding Peter Phillips' guest list has become so intense. It is not the event itself that has people talking. It is what the event allegedly reveals about the changing balance of power behind palace walls. For years, Prince Harry occupied a unique place within the royal narrative. He was the spare, the rebel, the prince who could challenge tradition while still remaining connected to the institution itself. But as one controversy followed another, and as interviews, documentaries, and memoirs continued generating headlines across the world, many royal observers began noticing a gradual shift taking place. The discussions were no longer centered on reconciliation. They were centered on separation, not dramatic separation, not public separation, administrative separation, emotional separation, structural separation. And that distinction matters because public feuds can be repaired, angry statements can be withdrawn, interviews can be forgotten, but structural changes are different. Structural changes are designed to last. That is why so many eyes are now focused on Peter Phillips, not because he is viewed as an aggressor, but because he has traditionally been viewed as a peacemaker. And when the peacemaker appears to move on, the symbolism becomes impossible to ignore. Sources and commentators continue debating what message is truly being sent. Some believe the situation simply reflects years of distance. Others argue it reflects a growing determination among senior royals to prioritize stability above everything else. Whatever the explanation may be, the result appears remarkably similar. The family continues operating, the institution continues functioning, the future continues advancing, and Harry appears increasingly disconnected from the process. Perhaps that is the most painful element of all. Not active hostility, not confrontation, not public rejection, but irrelevance. Because institutions often possess a unique ability to absorb disruption and continue forward. They adapt, they reorganize, they replace old structures with new ones. And once that process begins, reversing it becomes extraordinarily difficult. Meanwhile, William's position appears stronger than ever. The Prince of Wales has spent years presenting an image of discipline, continuity, and long-term planning. As Catherine steadily returns to public life and the next generation gradually moves closer to the center of the royal story, the focus of the monarchy appears increasingly fixed on the future rather than the past. And where does that leave Harry? That question remains unanswered. Some believe time could eventually heal the divide, others believe the distance has simply grown too large. What nobody can deny is that every passing year seems to reinforce existing boundaries rather than remove them. The silence surrounding this latest controversy only deepens the mystery. No dramatic palace intervention arrived. No emergency reconciliation effort emerged. No public campaign was launched to correct perceptions. Instead, life continued. Preparations continued, plans continued, and sometimes that kind of silence creates the loudest message of all. As Peter Phillips prepares for one of the biggest moments of his life, attention continues drifting toward the empty space where many expected Harry to be. That absence has become the center of the story, a symbol, a question mark, a reminder that some relationships do not end with a single argument or a single decision. They fade through hundreds of moments, hundreds of choices, and hundreds of miles until one day people suddenly realize how far apart everyone has become. Now the world waits to see what happens next. Will this chapter eventually lead to reconciliation? Will bridges be rebuilt? Or will this wedding be remembered as the moment when observers finally accepted that the divide had become permanent? Because as summer approaches and the royal family moves forward into a new era, one reality appears increasingly difficult to escape. The institution looks determined to continue its journey regardless of who is standing beside it. And if that is true, then the most important question is no longer whether Harry was missing from a wedding guest list. The real question is whether the royal family has already begun writing its future without him. And judging by the silence echoing from both sides of the Atlantic, that answer may already exist behind closed doors. The only mystery now is how much longer it will remain hidden.